Hi everyone, hope you're well. I thought this week we would have a bit of an intro into what we're doing on 4.3.3 and just an overview of what we've done so far on this. You can see here I've put 4.3.2 the limits, so everything that we're doing here is growth and development. We've looked at the limits and we've now started last week to look at 4.3.3, the strategies, the way to increase growth and development. Just simply looking on the board behind me, you can see this is quite content heavy. The theory isn't too tricky. Most of it you'll be able to work out quite quickly. For example, if you're struggling with infrastructure, if you don't have developed road networks or ports, if you're near the sea or if you're landlocked, we're going to have problems. And we're going to have problems developing, we're going to have problems attracting firms in, we're going to have problems growing. Well, some of the fixes, the solutions that we've been looking at this week, they probably match up quite nicely. So you'll see one today, for example, which you might not be surprised too much with, in that we've got, for example, primary product dependency, where countries are highly reliant on certain primary products. And then we've actually got on our list here of other development of primary industry. So some primary products, if you've got gold or in the past oil, actually are incredibly valuable. And if you look at some of the, for example, the Middle Eastern countries, primary products have actually been a huge source of development. So, what have we done so far? Well, 4.3.2 is all of our limits. You've had a look at all the limits. We've obviously spoken about the limits, and we've looked at examples for the limits. Not all of these limits are going to affect every country, of course, and this is why you will have found some examples of different ones for different countries. In the middle here, I've got my diagram. Now, generally here, what we're looking at is we're looking at the potential of the economy, because it's growth and development. How much can we grow as an economy? I've got my classical diagram, and the idea is that countries over time are moving from YF to YF1 and continuously moving right, so they're developing. The limits are things that stop or prevent you moving to the right, and the solutions, hopefully, are the things that fix the problems. So think about it. First thing, if you've got an essay on this, how could you use this information? Well, if you've got an essay on the limits, that would be your point, the problems. What would be your EV? Well, potentially, look, you've got a whole board of fixes here, so that could be there. Question on the strategies, on the fixes. Well, are there any problems? We'll mention a couple of problems with them in a second. So we've looked at the limits, we've looked at the first two bits, so I haven't listed them all, we're going to run out of whiteboard here, but we've done market-orientated and interventionist strategies. That's what we've covered so far. So within market-orientated, we're looking at the government removing itself and removing red tape and trying to get the market flowing. With interventionist, we've looked at the government really getting stuck in it and doing stuff. The only other diagram that we did last week that I must mention is the buffer stock diagram. Bit fiddly, okay once you understand it, and obviously I've provided a video on that. Anybody who's got any questions, let me know. So if I move across, what are we going to be looking at this week? Well, we're going to be looking at this bit so doesn't quite fit into market orientated or interventionist, and we're going to look at the final few strategies. Now, some of you I know will be quite aware of some of these. Certainly if you do geography, you may have an idea of some of these and you may have studied them in the past. So what we're going to look at, we're going to look at industrialisation, which is generally the growth of industry and the movement away from primary into secondary. We're going to look at the Lewis model. Now the Lewis model is a model, but there's not a lot to it. So when you look at it, when you look at the resources today, you'll find that actually there's not a huge amount to the Lewis model, so don't try and overcomplicate it. We'll look at development of tourism, which is very much what it says on the tin. You can probably think of developing countries that are focused on tourism. So Kenya has always been an example for safari holidays, but there are many, many more. Development of primary industry, which I've just mentioned about. So again, if you've got something that is a primary product but is really valuable and you can use it for growth and development, then really focusing on that is not always a bad thing. Fair trade, which you might be aware of. Aid and debt relief. These two are the most likely in past exams to be asked about. Now, one thing I do have to say at this point is all of this stuff on the board is all directly from the specification. So just bear in mind anything that's named in the spec could obviously be questioned about later. And the last bit that we're going to do is just this bit here, awareness of the role of international institutions. So we've got the World Bank that we've mentioned before, IMF and NGOs, International Monetary Fund, non-governmental organisations. It does say here an awareness of. Whenever it says an awareness of, it means that these three could come up within the context of a case study, but you don't need to know lots of specific data. So knowing who they are, generally what their role is, maybe a tiny bit of background, and a couple of examples maybe of NGOs is probably about all you need.